G'day Trailblazers, my name is Cam, and for today's video I'll be building a custom service in Marketing Cloud using some weather data via XML and some automations in Marketing Cloud. So here's our use case for today. I walk my kids to their daycare and sometimes it can be a bit windy and a bit rainy. When it is, it's very difficult to carry two kids to their daycare. So I want to try and make a service in Marketing Cloud that will SMS or email me in the morning before I get ready to take them to daycare so I can know if it's likely to rain. The way we'll make this automation work is I'm going to be using the Australian Bureau of Meteorology data on their FTP service. It's an XML file which I'll import into Marketing Cloud into a raw XML data extension. I'll then use some SSJS and AMPscript to manipulate that XML into a weather data extension, which I can then use some SQL to select today's weather forecast from. I can use a verification activity to check if there are any rows in that data extension. Of course, those rows will be if there is some rain today. And if there is, then it will trigger an email or SMS to let me know. So let's start things off with our weather data. Now I live in Brisbane, Queensland, Australia. I can see here that my forecast page has all the information that I need. It's got my chance of rain, and if there is going to be some rain, how much rainfall there will be. Now to get this data, I can actually access it through their FTP service. And the product I want is IDQ10095. Now this service I can access through an FTP integration they've got. I'll put these links in the description below, by the way. I can see here there is an anonymous FTP I can set up to connect to it. So of course I can use the anonymous FTP. It says here I can use anonymous as my ID to connect to the FTP and get those files. I've done this already. I can see that the file is existing in this folder that I specified. So let's now build the import activity using a custom file location to bring this file into Marketing Cloud. Alright, so let's start off with our brand new custom file location. I'm in my Marketing Cloud setup under File Locations. I make myself a new file location by clicking on Create. Let's make ourselves a new one called the BOM FTP. And this is going to be an external site, so I choose the External FTP because it is an FTP site. We can have a look at our documentation here, and it's going to be a FTP, not SFTP. So it says that the session that we want to use for a registered FTP user is going to be this one here, ftp.bom.gov. So I'll copy that address in to start with. But it's not just that address, I actually want some more information because the file is in a subfolder. If I check it out here, my forecasts are actually in Thenon Gen 2. So I'll copy that as well and put that into my file location, just like that. That's on port 21, and the username, of course, they provided is going to be anonymous. So I'll copy anonymous and make that my username and password as well. With that done, I'm going to go save, and I'll save my file location. Perfect. With the file location created, I can now jump into my Automation Studio and make myself a brand new import activity. So I'll go New Activity, and I'll call this one my BOM XML. Done, and of course use a schedule as my activation source. We'll then use an import activity. So import file, we'll choose and create a new import definition. Now for this one, it's going to be my BOM XML import. We'll go next. Of course, here we can choose our brand new location, the BOM FTP. Because this one is external, we have to provide the naming pattern ourselves, and there's no way to check it. But lucky for us, back on our main website here, it tells us what the file name was, which of course is that one there. That's .xml as we saw from the image earlier. So in the automation, we'll now put it as that .xml. Of course, we'll use the same trick as we did in our importing XML trick, which is to make this a tab delimited, not listing for quotes and not skipping bad rows. And then we'll go next. Now here, of course, we have to build our data extension to import it into. Now, lucky for us, on my previous video, we actually created an XML sample import. So I can use that very same data extension again. For good measure, I'll just jump into it and clear out those records. We're going to be using the blob__HTML to get as much data in there as possible. So I'll clear out that sample data, and we'll use this sample import in my demo XML folder. So I can go into my demos folder into XML, and there it is, no rows remaining, sample import. Next, I'm going to overwrite this file, mapping by ordinal. There is no headers in this one, and column 1 is the blob, and there is no column 2. Drop that one out, and there we are, ready to go. That valid field, of course, is needed for later on for our AMPscript lookups. That all done, we'll go next, checking it all out, looks pretty good. Column 1 is the blob, and finish. Let's now try the activity to make sure it works and to make sure we can get the XML file from the FTP website. So we'll run once, let's try and run that import. Perfect, so the automation has run successfully. It took 17 seconds and loaded in just fine. Let's check it out though by going into our records for our import here. Make sure we got some data. 206 rows, wow, all right. So we've got a bit of data coming in now, and let's check it out for ourselves. We'll go to our records. All right, that is our weather data, and lots of it. So our next step is going to be to reassemble this data using a cloud page function like we did in our previous video, which again, I'll link in the description below. So I'm now over in Content Builder, where I have my cloud page testing content block, which I'm using a content block by ID to look up that content block. So I can then click on my blue text here and see it render straight away in the cloud page. I can type in testing and go save and make sure it comes through straight away onto my cloud page. Testing, perfect. So now we're ready to start building out our AMPscript code for today. Okay, so the first thing we have to do is to do some AMPscript to return back the rows in that data extension. So we'll start off with an AMPscript code block, and let's set our rows to be equal to lookup rows. Of course, returning back the rows from our sample import data extension. With the sample row import, returning back where valid is equal to 1. We'll then get those and check it out, see how many rows we return. Now there were 206 rows. Let's make sure that worked. We'll go %% equals v. And let's output the row count of those rows just to make sure it's working. So we'll save and hopefully we see 206, and we do. Good start. So next one, we have to iterate through those rows. So let's make a for loop. We'll say for at I being equal to 1 until the row count of rows. We're going to do something until next I. What we'll do is just make sure that we can output those values, and let's just do a really quick and easy output line. And let's output line of v, where we do our row count of rows. To make sure we get 206 rows counting, and do we? Perfect. So that's working so far. Within each of these rows, we have to then build up that XML from that raw disassembled XML. So let's say set at XML, we equal to nothing to start with. And then we can build it up by saying set at XML, it's going to be equal to concat. And it will be XML plus some more data. And to do this, we'll be using our lookup with our field and rows function. So we can say with the field on the row, that's going to be the rows row set, finding the I row, looking up the field of what? Well, the field and data extension we're looking for is our blob HTML. So we'll do on our blob HTML, and that's going to be what we look up on. So that should now concat in our XML, which will have a new string there. And hopefully we can quite simply output that value. Let's take a look by going v %, and we'll output our new XML value, and we'll test it out. We'll go save and refresh. Perfect, that's looking like our XML file. Of course, it's not all the information, it's just what the text values were. So it looks like we've got it reassembled, so good start. So now that we have a confirmed reassembled XML file, we can use some XML methodologies to cycle through the file and interpret the data within it. Now, a quick tip is you can download the XML file for yourself onto your desktop to check it out for yourself. That's what I've done here. So you can see for myself, this is quite a complex XML file. Of course, product will be our top level. Then we've got a forecast as our next level down. Within our one forecast, there is multiple areas by the looks of it. Within the areas, we also have a forecast period, one for each period. Each date is there listed out. So we have to cycle through this XML file using some AMPscript. So I can jump to my documentation. Let's get our build row set from XML. We can take our sample set here and jump straight back into our content. So with our reassembled piece done, let's now say set at payload will be equal to our reassembled XML. So we're reassembling XML, which we've got there, good. And what is the structure going to be that we build our row set from? Well, looking back at our XML source, product is our first top level. So we do product to start with, product slash, what's after that? We've got forecast after that. So we do forecast, and after forecast, we then want to cycle through the areas. So we'll do area next, back and make it area. Okay, so we'll now cycle through, because it's area, let's call it area. So we'll cycle through that, and we want to see how many there are. So let's output the row count of area. Just to make sure we have enough areas coming through. Looks like about 10, looks of it. Let's try it out. Go refresh, and there's 13 apparently. Good-o. I'm going to assume that looks like about 13, so I'll leave it as that. Now, I don't actually want every single area. I live in the center of Brisbane, so I actually want this code here. I don't want the other codes. So as we cycle through the areas, we'll have to make an if statement to just return this area and ignore the previous ones. So let's try it out by cycling through our areas and outputting those values. Back in our AMPscript, and let's make ourselves another for loop. So we're done with the first for loop. Let's make another one down here. For this one, for A being equal to 1, because A for area, and we're doing a row count of area, of course. As you cycle through those areas, we want to check some values. So let's do a field row function, like this one here, just to check and see if we have the right field coming through. So I think, oops, use that value like that. So we're going to be cycling through the area piece on A, returning back not the blob HTML, but in fact, if we look at our XML structure, it's going to be the ACC attribute. So to do this, we'll be using our area attribute of ACC, and we use a special text by going underscore ATT for attribute. So we're checking the attribute value of that area. Of course, it's the A piece of the area row. We're checking that to see if it's the right value. So we'll be saying if that field value is equal to, it has to be equal to this one here. So I'll copy that. Here is equal to that value. Then we'll end if. That's of course within our for loop. If it is, then let's just do a really quick output to make sure we know it's working. So we'll say output line, and let's just do a BNE for Brisbane. All right, so if it's working, we should see one BNE gets output, not all 13, as we know there are 13 areas. We just want one to come out. So we'll go save and try it out. Go back to our cloud page and refresh. BNE once, and of course there's still 13 rows, so definitely got the correct value. Let's now cycle through and just make sure if we've got the BNE value, we know we're in Brisbane here, good. Let's now try some more value. Let's try and get some more out of that XML. How about the description? Let's output the description instead. So we'll go back in here and we'll say output line. We're going to instead output description. That will use our field values. So output field of our row area. That's going to be of our description. So description attribute. Now if this works, it should be the word Brisbane. So we'll try it out. We'll go save and refresh. Brisbane, perfect. So we've definitely got this area picked up now. Now within this area, we actually have some forecast periods to go through. So we have to do some more for loops. So back on our AMPscript here, let's start to write out some more for loops. We'll start off by copying our existing for loop here, the A one, and let's put this for loop inside here, just like that. Make sure I've got all our code indented so you can see it easily. Now it's going to be for, this is going to be, what is it called? It's our forecast period. So we'll call this one F, forecast period, F, and for F. Now, of course, we are going to want to get the row count of that first. So we'll have to build a row set. So the row set of, that's called forecast period. So our forecast period, building from our area row set, actually XML, we'll leave it as XML. And it's the area of what? Well, it's the area of number A. So at A. And we can't do it all as one piece. We have to use a concat. So we concat that. We then break on the AMPscript value and then restart on the text. So it's going to be the area slash and then forecast period. just like that. That's going to be our forecast period. So we'll check how many forecast periods there are for F, cycling through F. And then we'll, of course, do our field of forecast period on F, getting what value back. What should we get from the forecast period? Well, we've got index. That's a good start. We've got index 0, index 1, index 2. Let's return index attribute. So the index attribute. We don't want to do this as an if statement. We want to do this as a output. So we'll just output the index. Copy our forecast period values there. All right. Don't want our if right now. We'll leave those. So if we are cycling through our Brisbane section for each of the forecast periods, of which there are how many we're looking for? Is it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7? So it's 7-day for look. All right. And we'll make sure we've got those values coming through. So we should output each index. Now once we do, output line field, and we should get those numbers in a row. So try it out. We'll go save, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for our 6 or 7, including 0 indexes. Good. So we are cycling through that XML. As we cycle through it though, we're going to need to get a few values. So let's have a look at what values we have access to. Well, in our XML, we're going to probably want to get a few things. We'll probably want to get the start and end date. Probably want to get the icon, the precipitation range, the air temp, possible showers. All right, pretty much all these values we want. So let's do a quick cheat here, and we'll copy these values down and into our script so we can read it more easily. So I'll just dump them here for now, just so I can read them. So what we want to do is, as we cycle through this period, this forecast period, we want to check on those values. So what we'll say is, because we've got this forecast period, we now want to see how many of these elements and text elements there are. We have to build some more XML rows, unfortunately, so I can copy this one out and I can build a row set. This will be my element row set, building our forecast period with, again, another square bracket on element. Now the square bracket here, we of course break, and we are cycling through on F. There we are, to get the elements. So how many elements are there? Well, there's a few elements. So we have to cycle through the elements, so let's make another for loop. So we'll call this one a for loop, do next. It's going to be at E for element. Cycling through the row count of elements. All right, now if our element has a type of the forecast icon, we're going to want to set that value. So we can say in here, if. What we want to do, we want to check our values. So actually have one just here. That's exactly what we want. All right. If the field of element on E, and we want which one here? It's the type attribute. If the type attribute is equal to the forecast icon, then let's of course set at forecast icon code to be equal to that value. So it's not going to be the attribute type though, it's going to be the value code. All right, good-o. And if. So if that's set, that's our forecast icon code. Once that's done, our next one down is going to be the precipitation range. So if the attribute type, the type of the element is precipitation range, then set it to be that. Good. If the next element down is air pressure minimum, then set that attribute. And finally, it is air pressure maximum. All right, that's going to be all of our elements, and that'll end our element for loop. We can do the same thing again now for our text element. So put some more lines down, and here's our text element. We'll do T for text. We of course need to build our row set first. So where is our element? That was element 1. We need to do the same thing for text now. So for text, double check I've got the word text here. Yep, text. For text is text, and T on text. T for text, we're going to be cycling through what's the value. It is the type attribute again. So if precise, T on text, then we'll set the precise one there being text on T. Perfect. Let's drop those ones and reuse this one. All right. If the row count, no, it's another for loop. We don't need a for loop, just the if value, because we're doing next T, of course, because that's our E section, that's our T section, good. So in our next if statement, it's if the attribute value is not precise, but it's probability. Okay, probability, then set probability to be equal to the value, and done. Now the trick here is going to be that not all of those XML structures have all these values. I can see here the first index only has 1, 2, 3, 4. The next one down actually has 6, and then 5, and then 5 again. So we may have to have some null values. Now a trick for null values is just to redeclare them. So if I take my section here of my elements and then my text loops, so I've got my for loop on text just there, and I've got my for loop on elements just there. If we go back up to the top here, as we're cycling through our forecast periods, we can actually reset each of those variables by using the var function. So I'm going to reset the var function every time to reset each of those values. I could write this on one line, but for visualization, I'm going to put them all in a row like this. So by resetting these values, they'll be null. And because they're null, it means when I then try and insert this into a data extension, it's actually going to allow me to insert nulls and not have to worry about an existing value carrying over onto my new record. I've got precise here and precipitation. There we are, precise precipitation, and that's our precise probability. All right, that's all of our 6 possible values, I think. That's all of them. All right, now I might set a couple more values here because of course we do have the date we want to bring in as well. Of course, you're going to want the attribute value for the forecast index, the forecast start and end times. I want those too. So back onto my code, let's also set those values up higher. So as we cycle through, and for each forecast period, we can get those values. So we've already got the index value here perfectly. So let's quite simply set at index equals the index attribute. And then we'll set, what else can we set? Well, we've got the local time start. And that's that one there, which I have to use the attribute again for. And then the local time end. Okay, perfect. So that is now all of our values being set. Drop out the output there. And I've now got it looking pretty good. So I'll drop out that value. That is all my loops built. That's all my values built. We should now be able to output all of these values. To do so, just to make sure, as we go through each forecast period, so that's my forecast period for loop, which is this one here, ending on F. So here it is, here it ends. Let's now output that full set of values just to make sure it works. It should be all these values here. So let's go output line and concat. I'll put in all those values together. So let's just clear these off, make it a bit easier. All right, and then we can comma separate them all, just so we know it works, and bring them all up. All right, that's all our values. I'll then do a comma and a line break. Oops, comma and line break. There we are. And that should now be one for each forecast that comes through. Of course, index. We didn't do index. No, we did do index. There it is there. Do index first. All right, let's try that out. Got a lot of code written now. Should check our code more often, but let's give it a go. And that's why I should check your code more often. Okay, I think it might be our hyphens there. So I might drop those out and we'll see if that works better. All right, let's give that a go. Of course it was, just those hyphens. So we now have all of our outputs. So for day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, we have all those values. Now apparently day 0 is showers, shower 2 60% chance, and day 1 is possible shower 40%. Well, we can check our forecast, and indeed 60% shower 2 and then 40%. So our output's looking pretty good. All right, our last step now is to try and transform this data to put it back into a data extension. All right, so our next step is to upsert these values into a data extension. So we'll use our Marketing Cloud documentation for upsert data. Let's pick up the upsert data value there, and we'll drop it in above our next. So it's within our for loop here. And of course, we have to upsert it into a data extension which doesn't exist yet. So let's go make ourselves a data extension. The XML folder will go create. Let's make ourselves a new standard data extension. Call this one XML Brisbane. Next. All right, now we're going to use index as our starting one. Actually, I'll call it unique because index might be a bad word. I'll make that one the primary key as well. After that, we're going to use the rest of our fields. So we probably want our start time. That'll be important. Take that as a date time. Want the end time also as a date. Make them nullable just in case. All right, back to our values. We want our forecast icon code. That'll be important. We also want our precipitation. Pretty much all these values we want into our data extension. The air temp min and max. Very important. This means I could actually expand my use case and do a weather check as well, and not just a rain check. All right, and probability. Give that one a bit of text there as well. All right, that's our data extension. So we'll build that one out. And there it is there, XML Brisbane. So let's copy that back into our code, and we're going to upsert into XML Brisbane on one field, being our special matching field. And that field's going to be unique. All right, unique. Now, we are doing a countdown. We're not trying to save data over time. We're actually counting down to only select the next 24 hours. So for our unique value, we actually want to use the index value that we used up here. So make sure I've set index. I have at index. And this way we always replace the next 7-day forecast with the following 7-day forecast. Now with that done, we can quite simply bring in the rest of our fields. So start local time. And of course, our start local time will be our start local time. All right, next one is our end local time. And then the rest of our values down here. So let's have a look at them. We've got end time forecast icon code, forecast icon code. We've got the precipitation range, air temp max. Need some more. All right, precise. And probability. Okay, that's all of our values plugged in. So that will upsert the data with all those values. So we'll leave the output there for now, just for good measure. But let's test to see if it upserts those values. We'll go save. Right, now refresh our data extension and it's completed. So we go back to our data extension, 0 records now, but if I click on records, hey, there's our values. And of course, this being our first and most recent day with our following days all below with our forecast there. Fantastic, and a couple of nulls as you can see, so that var function's working well. So our data extension is populating correctly. Let's now go in and build another data extension. This one's going to be for our rain test. So we'll go create, go standard. I'm just going to choose from existing, just to make things easier. I can go into my folders, go to my XML folder and pick up my Brisbane example one here. Go Brisbane rain. All right, so I'll leave it as that, as Brisbane rain. My goal, of course, being to see if there's any records when I do some SQL that go from my Brisbane data extension into my Brisbane rain, based on my SQL conditions. So with that, we'll jump into Automation Studio and let's build out our SQL. So we'll start off on the workflow and we'll bring in a new SQL query activity. We'll go choose and let's quickly go in and do a create new query activity. And we'll go name will be BOM XML BNE. All right, we'll go next. And for this one, we're going to be bringing in the data from our data extension in our demos in our XML. So we want our Brisbane one here. So select all from Brisbane where we want this to be where what? It's going to be where the precipitation, I believe it was our best one there. We'll check it out. I'm pretty sure we can say where. If there's a range here that's not null, then it's likely going to rain. So even though there was a chance of rain, showers or 2, there was no range of precipitation. So I'm going to say this one's our chance of rain. So if this value is not null, we only want it to be where unique is equal to 0. So where unique is equal to 0 and where this is not null. So back into our SQL, we'll say where unique is equal to 0 and where the range is not null. We're going to check syntax. Oops. All right, where our value for unique, oops, there we are, where our value for unique is equal to 0 and where our range is not null. So if those two things are met, then we want to overwrite into my data extension. So the good thing with this is if 0 records are found, it's going to overwrite into 0. If something's found, then it will put something in there. So into my rain data extension with 0 records, I'll go next. And that's all done, so I can go finish. Now, what should happen next? Actually, I'll test this by going save. I should be able to run once that BOM XML piece. And we should, of course, get 0 records once it runs. So run that activity and go run. Now that done, my next step would be to make an email or an SMS. That's pretty easy stuff, so I might leave it as that one for today, and we'll do that as a future piece. Our next step though is to bridge these two activities. Once we've tested this one, is to make sure we have that SSJS activity in between here to manipulate that raw XML and make it ready to use in this SQL activity. Now to do this, I'll show a really cool trick. First of all, it has run good, and we should still get 0 rows because there was none that match it. Well, there's one that matches it, okay. Let's check. That's saying unique is 0. All right, well, there must be something in there then because it is in fact not null. So we may have to use a different checker. We may have to use, rather than a is not null, may have to use a string length. So we'll try it string length instead. All right, so back in the automation, let's modify the SQL. So it wasn't working how you wanted it to. Even though the field looked blank, it wasn't actually blank. So where the precipitation is not null, no, we'll say where the length of the precipitation value is greater than 2. I think that should do it because we couldn't see any characters on that original value there, but there must be something in there. So we'll say where the length of that field is greater than 2. All right, we'll save that and go overwrite, and hopefully we get 0 records. So this is a good test. This should now clear out that data extension. So we'll go run once, and let's rerun that SQL and see what happens next. So hopefully the activity has finished, and it's just running now. Nope, complete. Even better. We'll check on our data extension, it has 1 row, but we refresh our folder and now it shows 0. So it has deleted that row because there are none that match that condition. Perfect. Okay, and now to show you a cool trick so we can run some AMPscript that we've made in a SSJS activity in between these two activities here. So we can modify that raw XML into our usable SQL file. So I'll start off by dragging and dropping our script activity into our section there. And what we can do is we can choose to make a new activity. So I'll go create new script activity. This one's going to be our XML BOM. And now for our script. Now for our script, I've got one ready to go, which is this one here. What it's going to do, it's going to render a content block by ID and treat it as content, which means the SSJS will process it and run it. To do this, though, we have to make a new content block. So to be back into my content builder, what I'll do, I'll copy all my lovely AMPscript here, go back into content builder. I'm going to make myself a new content block. And I'm going to do a HTML content block. I'm going to paste my code straight in just like that. Now, I don't need to output things, so I can drop my output line information there. I've got some more outputs up here that I can get rid of as well, because there's no outputs. It's going to be running as a SSJS script. So all that done, and we'll leave this one just like that. I can then save my new content block. I'm going to call this one my XML BOM SSJS. So I'll save that block. And with that block saved, I can go back into Content Builder and click on it, and there's my content block ID. So I'll copy my ID, go back into my automation and paste the ID in just there. But there's one more thing we have to do to make this one work, and that is to hide these %% signs to allow it to run in the SSJS activity here. So for that, we can jump onto Matthias's blog. It's got some great walkthroughs here, and we can now do this with a SSJS trick. What we can do is we can actually hide the AMPscript by using these code blocks here. So I can take that code as an example, drop into my automation, and I can replace some values here. So rather than doing %% equals, we can go /%/%, like that, a bit sneaky, and then /%/%, just like that. And hopefully that's going to work for us. So let's try that out now and go validate. Looking good. All right, so we'll go next and we'll save this activity. Yep, there it is, and finished. So it's all saved. The problem is, of course, is that this file, when it runs, is going to re-update our data extension. So to prove that it works, we'll save our activity first. We'll go back into our data extension and clear off those records. So our Brisbane file here with 7 records, we'll clear this one off to prove that the SSJS is working. All right, and so we'll clear off those records. And all gone. Perfect. So back in Automation Studio, let's now run this middle activity to make sure it works. So definitely saved. And we'll go run once. Just running that SSJS activity, which will pick up our AMPscript, and then hopefully process the XML and put it into that data extension for us. That's kicked off straight away. Good to see. Okay, and it just finished, and so we can now do the moment of truth. We'll go back to our data extensions, and hopefully XML Brisbane has 7 records. There we are. So our AMPscript inside of SSJS, thanks to Matthias's blog, is now working, and we can see those records coming through. So that makes our automation tested and almost ready to go. What we have to do now is to configure a schedule to trigger this import every day, maybe before I wake up, say at about 5 o'clock in the morning. Trigger the import, check out that data, transform the XML into our data extension, which we then use the SQL here to test if any records are there. If they are, we of course use our verification step. We quite simply say, well, let's make sure that the Brisbane record here, if this data extension, the condition is greater than 0 records in the data extension, then we will continue. So we'll say if the count is equal to 0, then we stop the automation. Or I could do the reverse, of course, and use a notification and say if it's equal to or greater than 0. We could say to my email address, hey Cam, it's going to rain today. And go next. Of course, we could put the email address in, cam@email. And that could be it. That could be our super simple weather notification automation to let us know every day in case there's going to be a weather event. And I'll leave the walkthrough there for today. I hope you enjoyed this demonstration of how to build a really cool custom service in Marketing Cloud using an external XML source, transforming it using AMPscript and SSJS, and then using some Automation Studio features to check to see if records exist, then fire out a communication. If you have, then please let me know with a comment and a big thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so that you are notified when I release more Salesforce Marketing Cloud videos.